The air was thick with smoke, and the taste of burning metal hung heavy on the tongue. Broken ships lay scattered across the blackened ground, their twisted frames glowing faintly under the dying fire of the battlefield. Silence pressed down on everything, but it was not a peaceful silence. It was the silence after destruction, when screams had already ended, and only the faint crackle of flames remained. The man moved carefully among the wreckage, his boots crunching on shattered glass and scorched earth. He was human, tired and worn, his body marked with cuts and his face lined with exhaustion, yet he pressed on because he could not accept the idea that he was the only one left. Somewhere among the ruins, he believed, someone else had to be alive. His heart was too stubborn to let go. He carried nothing but a pack of medical rations and a small beam knife strapped to his side. His rifle had been lost in the chaos when the ground shook and the sky itself seemed to fall apart. Now, survival depended not on weapons, but on will. He searched broken holes and turned over scorched panels, ignoring the bitter smell of death that lingered everywhere. Each step reminded him that he was walking on the graves of both friend and foe. War had not cared who was right, only who was left breathing. He paused when a faint sound reached him, softer than the crack of fire, more fragile than the wind. A whisper of movement. He froze, eyes narrowing, ears straining. The sound came again like a weak gasp of air pulled through trembling lips. He followed it cautiously, pushing aside a piece of collapsed metal until he saw her. At first he thought it was just another corpse, but then he noticed the rise and fall of her chest, faint and uneven. It was a woman, though not human. Skin shimmered faintly in the firelight, a pale silver blue marked with glowing wounds that pulsed as if alive. Her armor was fractured, symbols of an empire he recognized etched across the chest plate. She was one of them, one of the enemy. His first instinct was to turn away. He had no reason to help her, no duty to carry the burden of an alien who might have killed his people. But he didn't walk away. He knelt beside her, studying the wounds. They were deep, burning with an energy he didn't understand. Her breaths were shallow, her lips trembling with words she couldn't form. She looked fragile, almost breakable, and yet there was something about her presence that radiated strength even in this broken state. He pressed a hand against her neck, feeling the faint pulse still fighting within. Logic told him to leave. His people would have called it justice. To let an enemy die, but his heart was not made of cold logic. He had lost too many already, and he could not bear the weight of walking away from another life even if it wasn't human. He slid his arms beneath her, lifting her carefully from the rubble. She was lighter than he expected, yet every movement drew a small sound of pain from her throat. Her blood was not red, glowed faintly, leaving strange trails against his hands as he carried her. He stumbled back through the wreckage, searching for cover, till he found the shadow of a collapsed wall where the flames did not reach. Setting her down, he pulled open his pack. His supplies were human-made, designed for human wounds, but he had no other choice. He cleaned what he could, wrapped cloth around the bleeding, and forced water past her lips when she stirred weakly. He did not speak, though the silence pressed heavily. Words felt useless here, as if the battlefield itself would swallow them before they reached her ears. Hours dragged by as he kept watch. He shifted his position only when the ground grew too cold or his legs too stiff. She moved now and then, sometimes trembling, sometimes gasping as if caught in a nightmare she couldn't escape. Once her hand reached out blindly, fingers brushing against his arm, and for a moment he thought she might be conscious, but her eyes remained closed, her breaths ragged. Still, he didn't pull away. He let her hand rest against him until it fell back again. Something about that small touch struck deeper than he wanted to admit. When the fires finally began to die, when the black night swallowed what was left of the battlefield, she stirred again. My eyelids fluttered, and slowly her gaze found him. Her eyes were unlike anything he had ever seen, glowing faintly like fractured stars, filled with pain yet carrying a strange clarity. For a long time she only looked at him, her breathing shallow, her lips trembling. Then, with a weak voice that barely carried in the stillness, she whispered words in her own language. He didn't understand them fully, But the tone was clear, the question heavy with disbelief. She was asking why. Why had he stayed? Why had he not walked away? The man didn't answer. He didn't have the words. He only met her gaze and stayed where he was, refusing to move, refusing to abandon her. And in that silence, between the ruins of war, the faintest spark of something new was born. Something fragile, something dangerous, but alive. The night stretched endlessly, the battlefield wrapped in shadows, broken only by the faint glow of smoldering wreckage. The human sat with his back pressed against the wall of shattered stone, his arm resting across his knee, his eyes fixed on the alien woman beside him. She had slipped back into unconsciousness after whispering those faint words. And though he could not understand her language, the sound of it lingered in his mind like a ghost. The world was quiet now, too quiet. Every silence after battle carried the weight of danger, for silence often meant enemies moved unseen. Still, he did not leave her side. His pack was nearly empty. His body was drained, yet something in him refused to abandon her. He told himself it was mercy, nothing more. But deep inside, he knew it was something else. Her wounds glowed faintly, in the dark, soft pulses of light that seemed both beautiful and frightening. They looked unnatural, as if her very body was burning with something alive inside her. He pressed his palm against the bandages he had tied, feeling the faint heat radiating beneath. He wondered if she would even survive until morning. Humans were fragile enough when wounded, and she was not human. Every breath she took sounded like a war against the silence itself. And yet she clung to life with a strength he couldn't ignore. That stubborn will reminded him of his own people, the ones who had died beside him, the ones who had refused to surrender until the very end. As hours passed, he forced himself to remain alert. Sleep was a dangerous luxury. Shadows moved strangely in the ruins, and he thought more than once that he heard footsteps in the distance. He kept his knife close, hand resting on the hilt, ready for anything, yet no one came. Perhaps the battlefield was truly abandoned, or perhaps something worse waited in the dark, watching. Couldn't know. When dawn finally bled over the horizon, the gray light revealed the full ruin around them. Ships lay in jagged pieces, some half buried in smoking craters. The ground was blackened, the air still heavy with the stench of fire. The woman stirred again, her breathing uneven but stronger than before. Slowly, painfully, her eyes opened. He saw confusion there, fear mixed with suspicion, and yet something softer lingered beneath it. She tried to move, but the pain struck hard, and she collapsed back with a sharp gasp. He caught her shoulder gently, holding her still. "Don't," he whispered, though he knew she couldn't understand the words. He kept his voice low, steady, the way one speaks to a wounded animal that might bolt. "You'll tear yourself apart." Her eyes fixed on him, unblinking. He could feel the weight of her stare, as if she were trying to read his intentions through his silence. She said something weak, broken syllables that he could not translate. Still, he understood the question buried in her tone. "What do you want?" He shook his head and pulled a small ration pack from his bag. Breaking it open, he offered her a portion of dried food, though he doubted her kind could eat it. She hesitated, then shook her head faintly, rejecting it. Instead, she lifted a trembling hand, pointing toward a broken piece of wreckage a few meters away. He frowned, but followed the gesture. Beneath the wreckage, after some effort, he found a small metallic container, scorched but intact. Inside was a strange liquid glowing faintly blue. He brought it back, and with weak hands, she guided it to her lips. The drink seemed to calm the heat in her body, her breaths easing just slightly after swallowing. For the first time, he saw the faintest trace of relief in her face. It was fleeting, fragile, but real. She leaned back against the wall, exhausted, her gaze still on him. The silence between them was heavy, yet not empty. Something unspoken grew there, something neither could put into words. As the sun rose higher, he realized staying here was dangerous. Fires had died, but scavengers would come, human or alien, desperate enough to kill for scraps. He could not remain in the open. He glanced at the horizon, then at her. She was too weak to walk, but leaving her was not an option. He had already made his choice the night before. He would not walk away. Carefully, he lifted her once more, cradling her weight against his chest. She groaned in pain, her hand clutching weakly at his jacket, but she did not fight him. He adjusted his grip and started moving, picking his way through the wreckage, searching for deeper shelter. His muscles screamed with exhaustion, but he pressed on. With each step, he felt the unspoken bond tighten, a silent thread binding him to the wounded stranger in his arms. By midday, found it a collapsed bunker, its entrance hidden beneath rubble. Inside, the air was cooler, the shadows deep, and it offered safety from prying eyes. He laid her gently on a flat slab of stone, then set about clearing space, arranging what little he had to make it livable. She watched him, her glowing eyes tracking his every movement. At one point, her lips curved faintly, almost like a smile, but it vanished quickly, hidden by pain. That night, as the world outside sank back into darkness, he sat beside her again, his knife resting across his lap. She was not his ally, not his friend, not even his kind. And yet, as her breaths steadied in the quiet shelter, he felt something stir inside him, a strange certainty. Their paths had crossed in fire and death, and now neither of them could walk away from it. The war had broken everything, but here, in the ruins, something else was beginning to take shape. Something fragile, something dangerous, something neither of them had expected. The bunker walls pressed in with a silence so thick that it felt alive. The human sat cross-legged on the stone floor, sharpening the edge of his blade with slow, deliberate strokes. The alien woman lay a short distance away, wrapped in what little cloth he had managed to salvage, her breathing steadier now, though every inhale still sounded strained. A faint blue light pulsed in her wounds, casting strange patterns on the rough walls. He had grown used to that glow, though it unsettled him every time his eyes lingered on it too long. It was not natural, not to him, not to anything he had ever known. She stirred, turning her head toward him. Her eyes opened and he felt their weight again. She watched him as if he were some puzzle she could not solve. For a moment, neither spoke. Not that words would have mattered. His language was not hers, and hers was not his. Yet the silence between them was not empty. It carried questions, suspicion, and something else neither dared name. He broke it first. "We can't stay here long," he muttered, knowing she could not understand. His voice filled the silence anyway, giving shape to the thoughts clawing at him. "Someone will come. They always do. And when they do, it won't matter if you're wounded or I'm tired. They'll kill us both." She tilted her head faintly, as though listening to the sound of his voice more than the meaning. Then she whispered something soft and broken. The syllables were unlike anything he knew, sharp edges wrapped around melodic tones. He caught none of it, but the intent was there. She wanted to answer. She wanted to be heard. Frustration flared in him. He slammed the blade down on the floor, the sound echoing harshly. "I don't know what you're saying." His words were louder than he meant, his chest heaving with sudden anger gnawed at her. But at the gulf between them, the wall that words could not climb. She flinched, her body tensing, but then she did something he didn't expect. She lifted, her hands slowly, weakly, and tapped her chest. Once, twice. Then she pointed at him. A gesture, simple and clear. He blinked, slowly, cautiously. He mirrored her motion, tapping his own chest, then gesturing toward her. Her lips curved faintly, almost imperceptibly, as though she understood that small effort. So this was how it would be, he realized. Not words, not language, but signs, gestures, patience. If they wanted to survive, they would have to build a bridge one movement at a time. The hours stretched as they tried. She pointed at the strange liquid container, and he learned it meant water or drink. He showed her his ration pack, tapping it, tasting it, offering it again until she finally pressed her hand to her throat and shook her head, not food. Slowly, painfully, they shaped a handful of meanings between them. Every success felt like light in the dark. Every failure, a reminder of how fragile this attempt was. by nightfall. They had built a fragile thread of understanding, but it was not enough. He still did not know who she was, what side she belonged to, or why her kind had been on this battlefield. She did not know what he truly wanted, whether he would abandon her once she could walk again. Yet something deeper moved in the silence between them, something words might never explain. That night, as the fire burned low, he caught her staring at him again. I think there was no fear in her gaze now, only something heavier. Her eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the flicker of the flame, turned away, uncomfortable under the weight of it. But he could not escape the thought pressing at the back of his mind. She was not just a stranger anymore. The ruins slept beneath the pale glow of a shattered moon, their jagged outlines stretching across the horizon like broken teeth. The human moved carefully through the crumbled streets, every step weighed down by the silence that came after war. The alien woman leaned against him, her strength still too fragile to carry her far. Every stone and shadow seemed to whisper danger. Every gust of wind carried the memory of screams. He knew this city had once been alive. Markets filled, towers lit, voices echoing through the night. It was a graveyard, and every grave hid something waiting to move. He had brought her here because the bunker could no longer hold them. Too exposed, too obvious. So they limped deeper into the ruins, looking for shelter that would not be found. But even as they walked, he felt the weight of unseen eyes. He knew hunters would come. Always they came. She sensed it too. Her body stiffened, her hand tightening weakly on his arm. She whispered something sharp in her language, eyes darting toward the darkness ahead. He didn't know her words, but he didn't need to. Her fear was enough. He raised his weapon. Blade in one hand, pistol in the other, his body tense like a bowstring ready to snap. A sound cut through the silence. Not wind, not stone shifting. Scrape. A claw. From the shadows, figures emerged, tall armored, faces hidden behind masks that caught the pale light. They were not human. They were not like her either. Their armor was black and ridged, their movements too precise, too mechanical. Hunters? He had seen them before. And every time they came, the ground was painted with blood. The woman gasped, pulling back against him, whispering again. This time he caught a word she had used before, one she had tapped against her chest when she tried to warn him. He did not know the meaning, but he knew the intent. Danger. He gritted his teeth. I know, he muttered, though the words meant nothing to her. His voice was steady, but his heart hammered like a drum. The hunters moved with slow certainty, encircling them. There was no shouting, no demands, no warnings, just silent intent. They did not want to talk. They wanted to kill. The human's eyes darted around the ruins. The open street was death. A narrow alley to the left, shadows, broken walls, tight spaces. It might give him cover. He shifted his weight, pulling her closer to him, whispering under his breath, "Stay close. Don't. Let go." She did not understand, but the urgency in his tone made her grip tighten on his arm. The first hunter lunged. He moved fast, faster than fear. His blade flashed, catching the figure across the chest. Sparks flew where metal struck armor, but the force of his strike pushed the hunter back. The others closed in, weapons rising. He fired his pistol, the shot cracking through the silence, striking one in the throat. The mask shattered, and the figure collapsed with a heavy thud. "Run," he barked, pulling her with him. She stumbled, weak and breathless, but she followed. Together they darted into the alley, the sound of footsteps pounding behind them. Stone walls loomed on either side, closing in, but the darkness worked in his favor. He shoved her into a broken doorway, pressing her against the wall as shadows streaked past. He stood in front of her, weapon ready, chest heaving. The hunters entered the alley, slow, careful. They knew he was here. She clutched his sleeve, whispering urgently. Her eyes were wide, glowing faintly in the dark, reflecting both fear and something more, trust. It hit him then. She believed in him, though she had no reason to. She was wounded, fading, hunted by enemies he didn't even understand. And yet when the world turned against them, She had no one else. He tightened his grip on the blade, teeth clenched. "Then they'll have to go through me," he muttered. The alley filled with the clash of steel and fire. The night stretched long, broken only by the distant echoes of battle and the soft rasp of their breathing as they ran. The alley behind them had become a tomb for their pursuers, some felled by his blade, others delayed long enough for escape. Yet he knew they had not ended the danger. Hunters did not stop. They tracked, they closed in, they never gave up. The woman stumbled, her strength draining faster with every step. He caught her before she fell, sliding his arm beneath her shoulders, half carrying her as they pressed deeper into the wasteland beyond the ruins. The city walls crumbled into open ground, vast fields of ash and twisted steel stretching beneath the cold light of the fractured moon. Once, this had been alive, roads filled with caravans, fields green with crops. To the horizon, he set her down beneath the shadow of a collapsed transport, crouching beside her, scanning the horizon. His chest heaved, every muscle trembling from the fight and the run, but he forced his body still. If they moved too slowly, they'd be caught. If they'd stopped too long, she would never rise again. Her breathing was shallow, her skin strange, and luminous, even in her weakness, glistened with blood. She pressed a hand to her side where the wound had deepened, eyes closing against the pain. He knelt closer, pulling open the pack at his hip, searching for anything: cloth, bandages, medicine. But he had so little. A strip of fabric, a small flask of water. It was not enough. She watched him, her eyes heavy-lidded, yet burning with something fierce. She whispered a word he could not understand, soft but insistent, like a plea. He frowned, shaking his head. "I don't know what you're saying." But she reached for his hand, pulling it toward her wound. She wanted him to act, to try, even. With nothing, he swallowed hard, nodding. He pressed the cloth against the bleeding, his fingers steady, though his mind raged with fear. Every second they lingered here brought death closer. Yet if she bled out, there would be no one left to save. The silence of the wasteland was broken by a distant cry, human, sharp, echoing across the steel plains. The hunters had found their trail again. He tightened the makeshift bandage, then looked into her eyes. "We move," he said firmly. She didn't understand the words, but she felt the command in his voice. She nodded weakly, forcing herself upright. He pulled her arm over his shoulder, bracing her against him. Together they began across the wasteland, their steps slow but steady. Every shadow seemed alive. Every gust of wind carried dust that stung. The eyes and lungs, the fractured moon lit the plains with pale fire, revealing the endless expanse before them, the dark shapes moving along its edge. The hunters were closing in. He adjusted his grip on her, whispering, "Hold on. Just hold on." His words were for himself as much as for her. For hours, they pushed through the wasteland, chased by echoes of pursuit. His body burned with exhaustion, but he refused to stop. The woman leaned heavily against him, her strength fading, yet her will unbroken. Every time he thought she would collapse, she forced one more step. She trusted him to keep her alive, and that trust gave him the strength to go on. At last, on the far edge of the plains, the ground shifted. Jagged cliffs rose ahead, and among them he saw it a cave, black and deep, hidden from the moonlight. Shelter. A chance he guided her toward it. Stumbling through the rocks, every nerve screaming with urgency. Behind them, the cries grew louder, closer. He could hear the hunters now, their voices harsh and guttural, their boots pounding against the earth. They had cut the distance in. He dragged her into the cave, pressing her against the wall as darkness swallowed them. He crouched low, weapon ready, every muscle coiled. The sound of pursuit filled the air outside. Shapes moved at the cave's edge, shadows stretched. Across the entrance, she clutched his sleeve, her eyes wide and terrified. He pressed a finger to his lips, urging silence. She nodded, trembling, but said nothing. The hunters stopped outside. Her movements were precise, methodical. They scanned, listened, waiting for sound. One of them stepped inside, the glow of its mask lighting the cave in a faint red haze. The human tightened his grip on the blade, breath steady, heart pounding. He had one thought, One vow burning through the fear: they will not take her, not while I breathe. The cave filled with silence. The hunter's shadow stretched long. The woman's breath shook against his shoulder. The human raised his weapon ready for whatever came next. The cave swallowed them whole, wrapping them in damp darkness. The woman leaned against the stone wall, trembling, blood staining the crude bandage he had made. Her breathing was shallow, weak, yet her eyes clung to him as if his presence alone kept her alive. He crouched in front of her, blade tight in his hand. Oh, yes. Every sense straining for movement at the cave's mouth. The red glow of the hunter's mask drifted closer. The sound of its boots' slow, heavy, deliberate tack coat across the rock. The human's chest rose and fell in silence, heart pounding like thunder, but his hands were steady. He waited. The woman pressed her palm against his arm, as if to anchor herself in his steadiness. As if to say, "Don't leave me." The hunter stopped only a few steps inside. It tilted its head, listening, scanning. A long hiss of breath escaped its mask, and for a moment the human thought it had found them. But then it turned, stepping back toward the cave's mouth. Two more shadows joined it outside. They spoke in guttural tones, words sharp and alien. Then split off, some moving down the cliffs, others searching the rocks above. They were spreading out. The hunt wasn't over. It was only tightening. The human let out a slow, controlled breath. He turned to the woman. "You can't stay here." His voice was low, urgent. She couldn't understand the words, but she read the fear behind them. She nodded faintly, though she could barely lift her head. He pulled her arm across his shoulders again, guiding her deeper into the cave. The tunnel stretched into blackness, the air thick with damp stone and dust. Each step was a battle her weight dragging against him, his own strength fraying, but he pushed forward. Behind them, faint echoes of movement grew louder. The hunters were not leaving. They were closing in. The passage narrowed, forcing them to squeeze through jagged stone. Water dripped from the ceiling, cold and steady. He guided her carefully, whispering small reassurances she couldn't understand, but that calmed her all the same. "Almost there. Just hold on. Don't give up." Then, suddenly, the ground widened. They stumbled into a cavern vast and hollow, its walls glimmering faintly with mineral light. Strange roots curled along the stone, glowing faint blue, bathing the chamber in ghostly radiance. For the first time since the chase began, he saw more than shadows, and in that light he saw her clearly. The blood, the wounds, the exhaustion, it also something else, faint shimmer across her skin, as if her body carried its own light. She was more than wounded prey. She was something rare, something the hunters wanted alive. The realization struck him hard. She wasn't just another refugee or survivor. She was important. Maybe even the reason this wasteland burned in the first place. Her eyes met his, wide, pleading, trusting. She whispered a word, again the same word she had spoken when she pulled his hand to her wound. He still didn't know its meaning, but now he felt its weight. It wasn't a plea, it was a vow. Before he could respond, the cavern trembled. From the tunnel behind them came the echo of boots, dozens of them, moving closer. The hunters had tracked them through the stone. There was a Daka. No way out. No more running. He lowered her carefully against the cavern wall, brushing her hair from her face. "Stay here," he whispered. She didn't understand, but her eyes widened with fear as she gripped his sleeve, refusing to let go. He pulled, free, slowly, gently. Then he rose, blade in hand, and turned toward the tunnel. His body screamed in protest, every muscle shaking, but his stance was firm. He planted himself between her and the coming storm. The first hunter emerged from the tunnel mask, glowing red in the blue-lit cavern. Behind it, more shadows moved, filling the passage. Their guttural voices echoed as they spread into the cavern, weapons drawn, steps confident. The human tightened his grip on the blade. His chest heaved, but his gaze was steady. He knew the odds. He knew this was the end. Yet there was no fear in him now, only resolve. He looked back at her one last time. She was watching him with wide, unblinking eyes, her lips trembling as if she wanted to call out. He gave her the faintest smile. Promise without words. I will not walk away. The hunters advanced. With a roar that shook the cavern, the human charged. His blade cut through the first, its mask shattering in a burst of sparks. The second fell. Beneath his strike, before it could fire, he moved like fire through the dark. Every blow fueled by a will far stronger than flesh. The cavern filled with chaos, shouts, steel light flashing off stone. For every hunter he struck down, 2 more pressed forward. But he did not yield. Even as wounds opened across his arms, his side, his shoulder, he fought. Even as blood soaked his clothes, he fought. Behind him, the woman's weak voice rose in the cavern, whispering the same word again and again. Not a plea this time. A chant, a call. The cavern walls seemed to answer, the glowing roots pulsing brighter with every breath she gave. The hunters faltered. The light spread, searing their masks, shaking the ground, as the human pressed forward. With the last of his strength, driving them back step by step, and then the cavern blazed with light, a force neither of them understood. The hunters screamed, retreating into the tunnels. The ground shook with their flight. Silence followed. The human dropped to his knees, his blade slipping from his hand. He turned, vision fading, to see her crawling toward him, her hand reaching for his. She caught it, gripping tightly, her eyes burning with tears. He smiled again, weak but certain, not walking away. That was his promise. The cavern light dimmed, wrapping them both in its glow as the world outside went silent.